The scream echoed through the salt plains before the blood even hit the ground, and Cale Rowan realized in that instant that the universe had already decided his life was worth less than silence. He lay half buried in white dust, ribs shattered, one eye swollen shut, listening as human scouts laughed and walked away, certain he would bleed out before nightfall, because Cale had always been the one people forgot to finish off. He had been born fragile on a mining moon where strength meant survival, cursed with brittle bones and lungs scarred by toxic storms, mocked as glass blood by other children, and abandoned early by a society that measured worth by physical power. When the Earth Coalition drafted soldiers to fight the Valari aliens, Cale was rejected without hesitation, deemed unfit even for supply lines. And when the Valari invasion shattered the outer colonies, he was not evacuated with the others, but left behind with the unwanted, the sick, and the broken. That was how he ended up crawling across the salt plains under a dying sun, hunted not by aliens, but by his own kind, who believed mercy was a waste of ammunition. As darkness crept in, Cale felt something colder than fear settle into his chest, the certainty that no one was coming, and that certainty broke him more deeply than any bone. The Valari found him then, tall figures emerging from the pale haze, their armor etched with living symbols that pulsed softly like breathing stars. And Cale laughed weakly because fate had finally chosen a punchline cruel enough to match his life. He expected pain, a clean execution, maybe even curiosity-driven torture, but instead he felt warmth as invisible hands lifted him, sealed his wounds, and carried him into a vessel that hummed like a heartbeat. When he awoke, he was surrounded by translucent walls and soft blue light, and voices brushed his mind, not as commands, but as whispers layered with urgency and fear. And one thought cut through the others with unsettling clarity. He doesn't know. He'll be perfect. Let him seed our future. The meaning hit Cale slowly, like ice spreading through water, and when it fully formed, his breath caught in horror and disbelief, because even now, even here, he was being reduced to a resource, a solution stripped of choice. The Valari were a species on the brink, their reproduction failing due to a genetic collapse accelerated by human bioweapons. And Cale's rare mutation, the same flaw that made him weak among humans, made his cells adaptable, resilient, capable of stabilizing Valari offspring. He was not special because he was strong, but because he survived when he shouldn't have, and the Valari had watched him for months, studying his quiet endurance, his solitude, his unnoticed pain. They spoke of him as a tool at first, calmly and clinically, but Cale's voice cut through their mental chorus, hoarse and trembling as he demanded to be heard. And something unexpected happened when he spoke not with power, but with raw honesty. He told them how humans had discarded him, how soldiers had left him to die, how every system he trusted had decided he was expendable. And as his memories bled into their shared mindspace, the Valari recoiled, not in disgust, but in recognition. They too had been hunted, dissected, cursed, their young stolen and studied, their suffering justified as strategy, and in Cale they did not see weakness anymore, but a mirror. Still, desperation clawed at them, and the war pressed close. Human fleets closing in on Valari space, with annihilation orders signed by leaders who had never seen alien children starve. Cale faced the truth then, that refusal meant extinction for them, and consent meant becoming something he never imagined, tied forever to a future he would not fully control. The turning point came when Cale was shown a vision of what the Valari planned to do without him. Forced extraction, genetic theft, the same cruelty humans had perfected, and something fierce ignited inside the man who had been quiet his whole life. He told them no, not like this, not without choice, not without him standing as more than a shadow. And for the first time in generations, the Valari hesitated. They offered him truth instead of force, revealed their fear instead of dominance, and asked him openly to help them live. Kale agreed only after setting conditions that shocked both species, demanding transparency, an end to civilian slaughter, and a chance to stand publicly beside the Velari as proof that cooperation was possible. When human warships surrounded the Velari vessel and opened fire warnings, Kale walked into the open hangar despite his failing body, broadcasting his voice across all channels, exposing human war crimes, alien desperation, and his own consent to a terrified galaxy. He was called traitor, liar, weakling, and when human command ordered the ship destroyed regardless of his presence, Kale understood that his life had always been a bargaining chip others were willing to spend. In that moment, as weapons powered up and space itself seemed to hold its breath, Kale made his sacrifice, linking his neural pattern fully with the Velari core, amplifying his story, his pain, his choice into a signal that flooded human networks. Impossible to censor, impossible to deny. The feedback nearly killed him, burning through his nerves and stopping his heart for precious seconds. But it worked, because billions saw the truth at once. Not propaganda, not reports, but lived experience shared across species. Fire was halted mid-launch, orders were questioned, alliances fractured, and a war stalled not because of superior weapons, but because one broken man refused to be silent. Kale survived barely, his body forever changed, his life bound to the Velari future he helped create. And when the first hybrid children were born years later, carrying the strength of two species and the memory of his sacrifice encoded into their genes, Kale watched from a quiet observation chamber, tears tracing paths down his scarred face. He had never been chosen by humans, never celebrated, never strong, but in the end, he became something far greater than a soldier or hero. He became proof that even the discarded can shape destiny, that hope does not come from perfection, but from empathy, and that survival is not about who dominates the future, but who dares to create it together.